Hey everybody, so excited to be with you. We're working out a few technical details, but I think we're good to go now. Hey, I want to just start off and say, you know, something similar that a lot of people have shared today. It has been a really difficult year, really difficult year and a half, especially for nonprofit leaders, especially for you. And most of you have been fighting for survival, for relevance, for funding. You have not thought about your brand. You have been thinking about short term needs, not long term needs. And so the brand goes on the back burner. So, my hope for you today, I'm going to share some tips and one specific tool that I hope really helps you. And I'm going to go ahead and share my slides here and we'll get started. All right. So today we're talking about clarity for your brand. And like I was just saying, when brand goes on the back burner, sometimes the symptom that you see is a lack of clarity. And I see this quite a bit with our nonprofit clients. So Christian might have said this in the intro, but I run a branding firm here in Atlanta, Georgia. We work with all kinds of different clients, but we specifically focus on brand identity, mostly for growing organizations. And we do a lot of work in the nonprofit space. So I'm going to share the way that we think about providing clarity and specificity in your brand. And to get started, I want to warm up a little bit. This is a workshop and we're going to get to some practical things, but I want to warm up and engage with you in the chat. So I think this is going to work. What I'm going to do, I'm going to share a slide, and I would like for you in the chat to drop the first word or phrase that comes to mind, okay? Now, it's going to be a logo. We're going to start with some consumer logos. So you're first going to see some consumer brands, then we'll get to some nonprofit brands. But again, I want you to drop in the first word that comes to mind, okay? Everybody good? Drop in the chat if you're good. Give me like a thumbs up. I want to make sure that everyone understood. Okay, Vanessa's, Susan's good. Okay, here we go. We'll start first with our title brand here. What's the first word that comes to mind? Good, yum, delicious, customer service. That's good. Chicken. Okay, let's keep going here. What's the first word that comes to mind when you think about Mercedes-Benz? Class, luxury. Yep. Class, classic, luxury, very consistent, huh? Okay, let's get a little harder here. What about Comcast? For those in the Southeast, I know how this is going to go. I know what you're going to say. Some of you don't even need to type a phrase, just put in an emoji, like a head explosion emoji or something. This one's typically pretty visceral reaction. Okay, let's get into the nonprofit space a little bit. How about the Boys and Girls Club? What comes to mind when you first see this? Support, helpful, fun, needed. Okay. What about charity? What comes to mind when you hear charity water? Nourish, innovative, yeah, refreshing, another refreshing. Okay, what about the Humane Society? What's the first idea, word, phrase that comes to mind? Love, love for animals. Puppies. What a great thing to be associated with. Puppies. All right, Habitat for Humanity. They don't have puppies, but they are good. What comes to mind? Jimmy Carter, home, houses, shelter, amazing. Okay, last one. Imagine your logo just popped up on the screen, okay? Your logo. So what would you think What would come to mind if your logo was now on the screen? More importantly, what would you hope your most important stakeholders thought of when they see your logo? What would you hope that they associate with you? What word or phrase would you hope would come to mind by your most important champions or supporters or donors or volunteers? That, in essence, is branding. That's how I explain branding. That is an exercise in understanding that your brand is your reputation. It is built off of a set of micro experiences that add up to this macro reputation that's out there in the ether, in the marketplace, what have you. So when you think about your brand and you think about a reputation, there's two really important questions that you want to think about when you say, okay, what do I want people to think? What's the ideal? Where am I headed? How would I want my most important stakeholders to respond to this exercise with my organization? Well, first you need to say, what contribution to the world? What is it that we do that is super unique and super special? What is it? What is that unique contribution that you do, that your organization does? And secondly, what does your audience need? What do people really need? What are they looking for? What do they fear? What are they concerned about? What do they want? What do they need? And where those two overlap, that's the place that you need to start thinking about from a brand perspective. We call this radically relevant. It's radical in the sense that different, you stand out, you're unique in terms of offering and experience and communication and visuals, but then you're also incredibly relevant. You have a clear value proposition. You understand your audience, you understand what they care about, you empathize with them, and you designed your brand to resonate. So I want everyone here to be a little bit more radically relevant. That's what today is really about, and that's the way that we think about brand identity. Now, if you're trying to assess if your organizational brand is really driving your work forward, if that reputation is working for you, if it's helping your impact, if it's helping propel your impact, there's 6 things that you can actually assess and sort of think about to understand kind of where you are. And I would imagine there's many different organizations represented here: size, shape, resources, capacity, subject matter, cause, methods. All of that, I'm sure, is very diverse. These 6 things are very universal to understand if your brand is driving your mission forward in a positive way, if it gives you that tailwind, or is your brand actually a headwind? Is your brand actually getting in the way and hurting your ability to make an impact? So I'll run through these 6. So on one side, you really need radical clarity for a brand. Your brand should be easy to understand, easy to engage with. It should quickly help people understand what it is that you do. Clarity is to what it is that you do. Now, nonprofits are notorious for lacking focus. A lack of focus results in a lack of clarity. Is your brand clear? Is it easy to understand? Sometimes I like to say, if a 5th grader read your website, they understand it. If so, then it's probably pretty clear. Secondly, you really need radical distinction. You need to view your brand as being super, super distinct. And you can analyze that, and we'll get into this a little bit today, compared to the competition. So those that you might compete with for attention, for donor dollars, for relevance, whatever it might be, whoever's in your sort of direct playground, your comparative space, how distinct is your brand for theirs? Do you have unique color? Do you have unique look and feel? Do you have a unique message? Do you have unique offerings, unique experience? If so, well, then you're really distinct, and that's probably an element of your brand that's driving you forward. If you blend in and you become invisible, well, that's probably holding you back. The third thing is radical control. And what I mean by this is, how consistent is your brand communications? If your Instagram feed looks like it's from one organization, that means that you probably have really good control around how you've defined your brand communications. There is a brand guideline somewhere. You've probably done some training exercises, and you've empowered either an agency or in-house resources to create on brand. Now, if you are super inconsistent on all of your communications, not just in social media, but in all your channels, well, then that's probably a lack of control over those brand assets. So if your brand is really driving you forward, you probably have really good control over that communication and that consistency. If your brand is providing some headwind and slowing you down, well, you probably don't have great control. Okay, jumping over to the relevant side, is your brand attractive to who matters most? Are people engaging with your message? I like to think about brand as a metaphorical storefront. So as people walk down the street, they take a split second to decide if they want to go shop in that store or not. And if your brand is doing its job, it attracts people in that metaphorical storefront into the store itself. If it's not doing its job, well, then they just walk right past, right? So is your message, is your look and feel attractive to who matters most? Now, if that brand is a metaphorical storefront and it attracts people inside the store, well, then you should provide a really great experience, right? So those that engage with you, do they engage with you over the long term? So devotion is a affinity over a long period of time. So do you have volunteers? Do you have donors? Do you have board members? Do you have beneficiaries or clients that have engaged with you in your work for a long time? If so, then that means your brand is doing its job in many ways and you have high devotion. If not, well, then you have an experience issue. You have something going on kind of within the organization that's not delivering on the promises that you put out on that storefront. Lastly is alignment. Alignment is about leadership and organizational belief and understanding of the brand story, and is it being properly communicated throughout the organization? Is the organization aligned around what our brand is, why it matters, who we serve, why we serve? And if so, well, then we would see a lot of alignment, which would suggest that a brand is actually helping live out a mission to make more impact for the organization, or it's creating that drag and that slowdown. So I'm curious to ask the chat, I'd like for you to drop in the chat, which of these as a nonprofit do you think is most difficult for your organization? Let's just do a quick little reaction. Is it brand clarity? Is it brand distinction? Is it that idea of control and consistency? Is it attracting with a relevant message or look and feel? Is it devotion? Is it put in one of these 6 words? Vanessa said distinction, clarity, alignment, attraction, control. Okay. Let's see if any more come in. Okay, that's good. That's actually very consistent with what we see. So in the nonprofit space, we typically see this. We see very, very poor clarity. We see a lack of focus. We see confusing offerings. We see confusing mission statements, confusing categories of sort of cause or subject matter. We definitely see some cautionary distinction. You know, a lot of organizations that blend in and sort of merge together visually or verbally. Control is definitely an area that we see as being challenging. And then attraction. Attraction is definitely one that, for whatever reason, it's really difficult to present a message that's really compelling or to have a brand that is attractive from a look and feel standpoint. Now, devotion, and it's interesting, no one really said this in the comments, devotion typically is high. Devotion is typically, you know, related to the work that you're doing. People love your mission, they love your cause, they love what you stand for. Maybe you're even delivering on amazing programs. Maybe your offerings and your experiences are really good, which in a lot of ways is tragic, because that tells me all you need is a little help in vanity. You just need a little help, that metaphorical storefront, to be a little bit better, to bring people in, to have that amazing experience. And a lot of times that is where brand not being fully leveraged for a nonprofit organization is a little bit sad. It does become an inhibitor for you delivering more impact for those that you serve. And alignment I often see as well. And I think alignment is typically low because there's maybe not the full commitment to the brand, because there's more commitment to the work and the mission and the impact and the boots on the ground doing the work, which is amazing. And in a lot of ways, consumer brands, they don't have to get too much into that. So they understand the higher level value of brand and they focus more on brand. But nonprofits really need to understand the power of attracting people into your organization so that they do engage, so that they do take a second look, so they do try to understand what it is that you're about. So I want to talk a little bit about a tool that I want to share that can help you have more clarity. It can help you have more distinction. It can, in a lot of ways, help you start the conversation around control and consistency. It can certainly help with the attraction, and it can certainly help around alignment. So you're going to get like an all-in-one tool here today, because it's been a hard year. And so I want to help you out, and I want you all to be more clear around your brand, what you stand for, why you matter, who you matter to, and how you could start communicating that. So this positioning framework is a little bit of a Mad Libs session that we'll go through, and I'll explain each fill in the blank, and then we should get to some Q&A at the end, because I'm sure you'll all have lots of questions about the way that this is structured. But this is sort of one of the tools that we use when we're trying to help nonprofits define who they are, why they matter, and how they should start to think about their communications from a brand perspective. Okay, so here we go. It's pretty simple. So the first Mad Libs fill in the blank style statement is, we are a blank. This is your defining category. This is related to your cause. We are a blank. This fundamental noun, a lot of times, becomes a big part of the organization's identity. So we're gonna double click into that. We're gonna talk a lot about defining category. Secondly, we are a blank that blanks. Now this is the key differentiator, and for nonprofits, the key differentiator is more times than not about the method. It's this method and distinct way of doing your work. This is the how, and we're gonna get into the how as well. And then second to last is the for. So we are a blank that blanks for somebody. Who are we doing this work for? Now, in the nonprofit space, this is your beneficiary. This is your client. This is whomever it is that you are serving directly. Who is it that you're wanting to impact? We're going to talk more about that. And then lastly, because fill in the blank, and we're going to talk more about an emotional conviction. So this is this core belief, this rallying cry, this is commentary on the world as it is today that you want to see fixed and changed through your organization. So we're going to work through filling this out. We are a blank that blanks for blank because blank. Okay, let's talk first about who are we? What is that cause category? Now, in a lot of ways, this should be the easiest blank, but because it requires such clarity and such simplicity, it might be one of the most difficult. So we are a nonprofit fighting for fill in the blank there, or we are a blank nonprofit or blank organization. These are the typical constructs that we see here. So some examples: we're a human rights organization, we're an environmental nonprofit, we're a global sustainability nonprofit, or we're a youth development nonprofit, or we're equity and ethics nonprofit. So you can see by those examples that this is not rocket science. This is meant to drive clarity. You want to get clear in as few words as possible in this. What is your cause category? What is it that you're fighting for? What subject matter is right for kind of the full landscape of where you play and what you contribute to? Now, typically this is going to be in your mission statement. There's probably something in your mission statement that suggests what your cause is. That's great. Don't put your mission statement here. That's not what we're trying to do. We're just trying to pull out a noun and maybe some sort of qualifier that would go along with that. Now, this is the area to get really, really clear, really simple. This is likely what you use to introduce yourself on an elevator or at a cocktail party when we are around other humans. It's that simple, easy, just sort of qualifying language that typically goes in here. Okay, so that's the cause category. That's the beginning start, the start of our story. That's the foundational part of our story as a brand. Secondly, is to get into this key distinction. What is it that makes us really unique? And I, for one, love this part of my job when we help organizations trying to define really clearly who they are, because we get a chance to look at the competition. And my number one strengths finder is competition, which I didn't even know that was a strength. Apparently it is, but I like this part of the work because we get to look at the comparative landscape with other organizations as compared to our client. And we're outsiders, so we really start to see some patterns and some observations. But you can do this as well. Think about those top 3 to 4 to 5 competitors that you most often compete with donor dollars for, or engagement, attention, or you're compared to. Some of these might be strategic partners of yours and allies, and that's okay. Competition is not a dirty word in the nonprofit space. They might be allies in arms, but in moments you are competing. So you really want to understand who they are. Look through all of these websites as you think about those top 5, let's say, and try to read the primary pages. You don't need to get back their 2010 blog posts, just primary pages. And then what we typically do is we start to summarize it. So we look for messages, we look for messaging themes. If you want to get really nerdy, you can look for brand voice and kind of overall tone. And we sort of assess kind of key messages. This is for a for-profit competitive landscape we were looking at, where we start to see messages that are kind of grouped together by themes. And then we simply just look for the white space. We really start to look for what is it that we're doing that is true about us and authentic about us that we could leverage in a distinct way. And let's really amplify that part of our story, simply because no one else is really taking that angle on communicating who they are. So you can do this. It's called a competitive audit. You can do it. It does not take that long. It's not that difficult, but this is a good starting point for trying to find out what is it that is distinct about your organization. And here are a couple more tips in looking for specifics and asking yourself some questions. So if your organization disappeared, what would the world be missing? What would the world be missing? Would they be missing anything? My guess is yes, they would be missing something, but what specifically would they be missing? Also, you can ask, what's your unique how? A lot of times nonprofits, and I love this, but a lot of times organizations focus too much on the why. We get really excited about big why language, and we will get to that. But at this point of the positioning framework, it's more about the how. It's about this unique method or program or point of view or world to get to something that's a little bit more distinct here. You could also say, what have you been really successful? What has made you so successful this far? Or even more challenging, what's your fundamental verb? Are you creating? Are you uniting? Are you freeing? Are you liberating? Are you empowering? Are you equipping? Think about that fundamental verb that most identifies with your organization. And that's also a really good start. Okay, so we've got that cause category, we've got the method and distinction, we've got 2 more parts here. So who are we for? And this again is about the beneficiary, the client, who you are serving. And that's because in this story, we want to tell the story of impact. We want to tell the story of those that we're serving, and donors and funders and future advocates or champions, they want to know that story. Now, there is an exercise going through to think more about your donor and their persona and what they look for from you, but that's not necessarily this exercise. That's a different breakout. So as you think about your beneficiary, your client, I want you to think about their persona and their mindset. So we don't do a lot of demographics in the brand world. Demographics are great. Those work great for marketing purposes, but we think mindset. What is the most defining mindset of that person that you are serving, that ideal person? This isn't at the exclusion of anyone else, but we're trying to say, who are we ideal? Who gets the most value out of our programs and our services and our mission? And let's focus on that. And we know it will trickle down to many, many other people, but for the sake of brand, for our story, let's get to this defining mindset more than anything. And you can get there by asking yourself that question. You can think about functional and emotional needs. You can also think about, why do they choose us? Why do those that we help choose to let us help or choose to engage with us? Okay, so that's a little bit more about ideal client. I'll share some examples with that here in just a minute. But when I say mindset, what I mean is like, if you're if you're an organization helping those facing homelessness, you might say, we are for the down and out, or we're for the in between, or we are for the chronically ill, or we are for, you get a sense of that language that's best used there. And again, I'll show you an example here in a minute. Okay, lastly, this is where we get to the fun, flowery language. This is where we get a little bit more into the why. Why do you exist as an organization? What is it that drives you? What is your core belief? And I want to share some examples of how we have constructed language in this space so that you get a sense of what you're going for. Again, it's as few words as possible, but it's commentary on what's wrong with the world. Why do you do what you do, and what's most beneficial about the work that you do? What drives you? Why did you get into this organization or this cause to begin with? So it might sound believe. We like constructing this part of the positioning with a we believe, because it forces you to say something really powerful. We believe global sustainability is within reach. Well, that's not true. What do you mean by that? And it beckons more discussion. That's what you want to do with this emotional conviction in this statement. We believe that water should do more. Not many words, but very intriguing. That powerful language. Or we believe food is the answer to many of the world's problems. It actually goes back to our food, to food oases, to the lack of funding, to good nutrition. Many of the world's problems could be solved if we just address food. So you get a sense here of what we're going for with this last statement, this core belief. And a few tips here, and I've mentioned this, but why did you choose this work? You can do why this work? What stirs you about this work? What is pointed, unashamed commentary on this work? Say something sharp and important and strong. Don't be humble with this statement. Be bold with this. What's your vision for the future? What will it look like if you're successful? Put that language here in this statement. Okay, so we've got it completed, filled out. We've double clicked into all of the Mad Libs, fill in the blanks. And here's an example of one. Global sustainability nonprofit. This was in the global sustainability world, obviously, that creates stories and entertainment to meet local needs for the global good for impressionable youth and teens, because we believe a sustainable future depends on the stories we create. So you get a start here of the story. You understand the category that they're in. You understand a little bit more of the method, of the how. You understand who they're for, and you get a sense of focus there. And then you understand their heartbeat a little bit more. And the idea here is, as you work on this fill in the blank, I would recommend that you go through it with your leadership team, that you get to a draft and you start to socialize it with your employees, with your staff. You then start to really think about how it can infuse everything in your organization. And the way that I see this typically work is that you align on this positioning framework, and that becomes a little bit of the lens in which you see all of your brand communications, your message, your look and feel. I think it's very helpful then to have this infused into your culture, even your strategic planning. So this one tool, if you can work through that, if you can get buy-in, if you can socialize it, this one tool can bring you back to a point of clarity. And it's important. Don't reinvent the wheel every 6 months. Once you land on filling out this framework, keep it in place. Let it be firm and solid for at least 12 months. You can always change it. The world is changing fast, but you have to commit to it. You have to commit to it. Sometimes I say that by the time you're tired of language, your external stakeholders are just hearing it for the first time. So you've got to commit to it, and you've got to communicate it consistently over and over and over. Okay.
Thank you again for being here, Blake. It's been so fun just to learn from you in an audience that you've probably never actually gotten to meet me yet, but I know I've just gotten to walk alongside of a foundation who has benefited from the work that you and your team do. And so all these are such great questions to think through. And I think the folks in the chat and the ones who are watching in now and get to watch later will really benefit from taking a moment and being like, hey, it doesn't have to be how it's been. Like, we can take a look at these questions and we can create something that really articulates or at least gets the attention of folks to communicate something even closer to what we want to be communicating. So very thankful for the work you do, thankful for the ways that you've just supported this community, and very thankful to have your time here